Hi guy, welcome back TV spoilers. Victor Newman's loss of Newman Enterprises didn't just bruise his pride, it carved a wound straight into the core of everything he believes he is. For a man like Victor, power is not a possession, it's identity oxygen. And proof that the world still bends when he speaks. The AI attack that helped rip his empire from his hands wasn't merely a corporate disaster. It was humiliation on a public stage, the kind of humiliation Victor Newman never forgives, never forgets, and never survives without making someone bleed for it. His rage didn't explode in loud theatrics. It thickened into something colder, heavier, more lethal, an approaching storm that made the air in Genoa City feel tighter. As if everyone could sense that a reckoning was coming. Victor didn't need anyone to tell him that this was a war. He already knew. And in his war, there would be no compromise, no mercy, no learning experiences for his enemies. There would only be consequences delivered with precision, designed to destroy not just reputations but lives. In Victor's mind, one name rose above the rest as the perfect symbol of betrayal: Phyllis Summers. She wasn't necessarily the only player involved, but she was the one who embodied everything Victor despised: reckless disguised as intelligence, audacity masked as confidence, ambition that didn't know when to bow down. Phyllis had always walked around Genoa City as if she could outthink any threat, and outmaneuver any enemy as if the rules were made for everyone else. But to Victor, that arrogance wasn't strength. It was an invitation, a challenge. And Victor Newman never turns away from a challenge or crushes it, until the person who dared to provoke him wishes they'd never taken their first breath. That's why Victor summoned Michael Baldwin, not for a discussion but for a mission. Michael had served Victor long enough to recognize the difference between a legal request and a personal vendetta dressed up as justice. This was the second one. Victor didn't want a long, drawn-out battle where Phyllis could spin narratives, stir sympathy, or slip through loopholes with a smirk. He wanted a fatal strike, something airtight enough to put Phyllis in handcuffs, something strong enough to hold up in court, something brutal enough to end her freedom, her influence, and the illusion that she could always land on her feet. Victor demanded every weakness, every piece of misconduct, every trace of wrongdoing connected to the AI attack. He wanted the kind of evidence that wouldn't just threaten Phyllis. He wanted the kind of evidence that would bury her. And then Victor saw what mattered even more than documents and numbers: Cain. Cain wasn't operating from confidence anymore. He was operating from desperation. He was a man trying to stay above water while the tide of consequences rose higher with every hour. Cain's biggest problem wasn't just the law. It wasn't even Victor. Cain's greatest vulnerability was Lily, his unresolved guilt, his obsession with redemption, his need to matter to her again. Cain wasn't merely regretful. He was haunted, like he'd been walking through every day with the weight of his mistakes chained to his ribs. He didn't just want forgiveness. He wanted a second chance at the life he once believed belonged to him. And that longing made him predictable. It made him easy to control. Victor Newman has always been a master of finding weakness and turning it into a weapon. He understood Cain's psychology instantly. Cain could survive being hated by strangers, attacked by enemies, and judged by the public. But he couldn't survive being erased by Lily. He couldn't endure the certainty that she would look at him and see nothing but a failure. She was relieved to escape. That fear, that craving for Lily's respect, was the lever Victor needed. So Victor didn't just threaten Cain, he offered him a lifeline wrapped in poison. A deal. Betray Phyllis. Deliver the evidence. Help Victor destroy her. And in return, Victor would reduce Cain's punishment. Victor never explained what reduce meant. He didn't have to. Cain only needed to believe the possibility was real. Cain only needed to believe there was a path out of the abyss. And that was the true cruelty of Victor's offer. It wasn't mercy. It was coercion disguised as opportunity. Victor wasn't saving Cain. He was turning Cain into a tool, a knife he could use without dirtying his own hands. Cain didn't accept with confidence. He fought himself violently in silence. Part of him wanted to believe he could still make things right without becoming a traitor. Part of him wanted to cling to the illusion that he could earn Lily's forgiveness through something honorable. But that part of Cain was weak, suffocated under reality. He could see the walls tightening around him: Victor's wrath, legal consequences, public destruction, and Lily's refusal to wait around for a man who kept proving she couldn't trust him. Cain understood something devastatingly simply: if he went down, he would lose Lily forever. Not gradually. Not with a chance to recover. Forever. And that fear was stronger than his pride. stronger than his conscience. So Cain accepted, not because he suddenly hated Phyllis with clean, righteous fury, but because he hated what he was becoming and yet still couldn't stop himself from becoming it. He told himself it was survival. He told himself it was a second chance. He told himself it was the only way to crawl back toward Lily. But the truth was uglier. Cain was choosing betrayal. Because betrayal was easier than being destroyed. Betrayal gave him the illusion of control. Still, a darker question began to grow inside him as the deal took shape. Was this truly just Victor's game, or was Cain secretly preparing revenge of his own? Cain had been burned before. He had been manipulated, pressured, used. And Phyllis, brilliant, ruthless, always convinced she was the smartest person in the room, was not someone known for loyalty. When loyalty became inconvenient, Cain had once stood beside her, once believed they were allies, once convinced himself their partnership meant something. But now, as he stared into the wreckage of his own life, he couldn't ignore the resentment rising up his throat. How many times had Phyllis pulled him deeper into trouble? How many times had she treated people like pieces on a board, promising protection while secretly prioritizing herself? Cain didn't want to admit it, but the betrayal was starting to taste like payback. From that moment on, Cain became the most dangerous kind of man, one who is smiling on the surface while breaking apart. Inside, he stepped into the role of the loyal collaborator while secretly preparing Phyllis's downfall. He couldn't confide in anyone. He couldn't ask for reassurance. He couldn't even fully admit the truth to himself without choking on shame. Every day became a performance, a tightrope walk over a pit of consequences. And every time he thought about handing Victor the final piece of evidence, his stomach twisted with self-disgust. He told himself he was doing it for Lily, but deep down, he knew he was also doing it for himself. For escape. For absolution. For the chance to rewrite the story where he wasn't the loser anymore. The process of gathering evidence wasn't quick or simple. It wasn't a neat folder delivered in one clean motion. Cain had to dig, track patterns, isolate actions, connect dots, and identify the kind of misconduct that could actually stick in court. And the deeper he went, the colder his blood became. Because every piece he found didn't just implicate Phyllis, it proved how far the game had gone. It showed how reckless the choices were, how careless the cover-ups had been, how confident Phyllis must have felt that she could outsmart consequences. Cain realized that the evidence wasn't merely a threat. It was a cage being built in real time, and he was building it with his own hands. Meanwhile, Phyllis had no idea just how tight the trap was becoming. She could sense pressure. She could feel the atmosphere shifting. She noticed the conversations that stopped when she entered a room, the calls that went unanswered. The sudden distance in people's eyes. Phyllis is not naive. She understands how power moves, how fear spreads, how enemies circle. But she still believes she could survive it. She still believes she could improvise, manipulate, bargain, and strike back. She kept her chin high and her steps steady, even when tension started crawling under her skin like electricity. What she didn't realize was that the real danger wasn't just Victor. The real danger was proximity. The knife wasn't across the battlefield. It was right beside her. Victor, on the other hand, was patient. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. He waited like a predator, waiting for the right angle, the perfect moment, the cleanest kill. He let Michael work the legal side. He let Cain do the dirty collecting. He let the pieces align until the final outcome became inevitable. Victor wasn't just reclaiming power, was restoring order the only way he believes order exists. Through fear and punishment. Genoa City needed a reminder, and Victor Newman intended to deliver it. Then Cain handed over the evidence. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like emptiness. Like he had torn out something human inside himself and thrown it into the dark. But along with that emptiness came a disturbing sense of relief, the relief of a man who had just escaped the worst possible ending. Even if he escaped it through something unforgivable, Cain told himself he could still rebuild. He told himself this would earn him points in the right places. He told himself Lily would see him as someone trying to make amends. But another truth chased him like a shadow. Lily doesn't respect betrayal. Lily doesn't soften for cowardice. And if she ever learned what Cain had done, the very thing he used to win her back might be the reason she never lets him near her again. And then the collapse came, swift and cruel. Phyllis faced an arrest warrant or criminal prosecution. The fall wasn't gradual, it was a free drop. One moment she was standing in her familiar armor of confidence, and the next she was staring at the reality that freedom could be taken from her with a signature and a pair of cuffs. For someone like Phyllis, the terror wasn't only legal. It was personal. It was humiliation. It was the destruction of the identity she wore like a crown. Her power, her influence, her ability to intimidate and control everything began slipping away all at once. And the most brutal part wasn't just that Victor was winning. It was that the world would watch her lose. Phyllis tried to keep her face unreadable. Tried to maintain the illusion that she could still spin the situation, still shift blame, still escape. But even she couldn't ignore what was happening. She was being cornered in a way. She couldn't outtalk, couldn't charm, couldn't threaten, couldn't fix. Running would make her a fugitive. Staying would make her Victor's prisoner through the justice system. Fighting back would only tighten the noose. The walls were closing in, and for the first time in a very long time, Phyllis wasn't sure there was a door. Victor watched it all with cold satisfaction. He didn't need to smile wide or celebrate loudly. This wasn't entertainment, was restoration. Phyllis losing her freedom meant Victor had proven something to everyone who dared to doubt him. It meant Newman blood still had teeth. It meant the city would remember the rule they always forget until it's too late. Victor Newman always hits back harder. But the ending wasn't clean. It wasn't a neat moral victory. Because Cain wasn't a hero, was a survivor covered in ash. He had escaped one disaster by pushing someone else into it. And that kind of choice leaves a stain that never truly disappears. Cain's future now depended on keeping the truth buried. On staying useful. On hoping Victor never decides he's disposable. On praying Lily never learns what he did. And Phyllis, brilliant, furious, cornered, was not the kind of woman who goes down quietly. Because in the final seconds of her collapse, one thought rose through the panic like a blade slicing through fog. Victor didn't find this evidence by accident. Someone delivered it. Someone close. Someone trusted. Someone who smiled in her face while sharpening the knife behind her back. And as the night settled over Genoa City, it didn't feel calm. It felt like the moment before a new explosion. Victor believed the war was ending. Cain believed he had bought himself time. But Phyllis was beginning to see the pattern. Beginning to connect the betrayal to a name that would change everything. Because the moment Phyllis says that name out loud, the real nightmare begins. Newman Enterprises at this point is no longer just a corporation, it's a battlefield still smoking from the blast. A place where power is fought for through dirty deals, shadow strategies, and promises that sound like honey but cut like knives. With Genoa City still reeling from the AI attack, and the fallout spreading like a slow-moving tidal wave, Phyllis has become more dangerous than ever, not because she's firmly in control, but because she believes she can stay in control. She moves through chaos as if she's the one directing it. As if every enemy is just another piece waiting to be placed on her board. What Phyllis doesn't realize or refuses to admit is that every time she convinces herself she's playing the war, she's actually standing on ground that's rotting underneath her. And in a world like this, one crack in the right place is all it takes for everything to collapse in seconds. Cain enters Phyllis's orbit at the exact moment. She craves the feeling of having a real Alice Simeone beside her, not because they fear Victor, not because they want quick profit, but because they believe in her. And Cain knows that. He sees in Phyllis something both powerful and vulnerable, the pride that insists she's smarter than everyone else, and the obsession with proving she's still the one holding the strings, even when the world is trying to drag her down. Cain doesn't attack her with force. He attacks her with softness, with intimacy that feels perfectly tailored, with emotional harmony that's constructed like a flawless stage set. He talks about ambition, about the future, about building an empire together and strong enough to challenge every old regime in town. Most importantly, Cain makes Phyllis believe that at last, someone sees the greatest version of her. When Phyllis hears those words, she doesn't just hear them with her ears. She hears them with the part of her that needs to be admired. The part of her that secretly longs to be chosen, the part she hides beneath steel and swagger. But behind the sweetness, Cain isn't moving with his heart. He's moving with motive. Deep down, he is being driven by two hungers at once, the hunger to win Lily back at any cost, and the hunger to punish the world for what he believes has been taken from him. He's no longer a man searching for the right path, as a man willing to twist reality to get what he wants. That's why the way he gaslights Phyllis isn't just romantic manipulation. It's strategy. Cain plants the idea that she is the center of everything, that she is the chosen one, that he can't exist without her. He paints devotion like destiny. He builds a fantasy so carefully that Phyllis steps into it, without even noticing the door closing behind her. And Phyllis, so proud of her intelligence, falls for it, not because she's foolish, but because she's too certain she can't be fooled. In Phyllis's mind, being used is something that happens to weaker people. She would rather believe in a dangerous dream than admit she has a blind spot. As Phyllis sinks deeper into the rush of "we will rule together," Cain grows bolder. He subtly steers every conversation about Newman Enterprises toward confrontation with Victor, awakening Phyllis's natural instinct to rebel. Cain understands something crucial once Phyllis defines Victor as her ultimate enemy. She will destroy herself if she has to, just to destroy him first. Cain doesn't have to push her into war. He only has to ignite her pride, remind her that Victor never truly respected her, that the city always doubts her, that only Cain believes she deserves to sit on the throne. And Phyllis, intoxicated by power and fueled by old grudges, begins to see Cain as the weapon that can make her unstoppable. She convinces herself that two brilliant minds together can create a storm strong enough to drown every outdated power structure. She doesn't see that Cain is standing behind her with a blade hidden under his smile. But Billy Abbott is the kind of man who never feels comfortable around alliances that look too perfect. Billy has lived long enough inside the Abbott-Newman war zone to know that if a deal sounds too good, the price will be monstrous. He doesn't believe in romance blooming cleanly in the middle of a power struggle. And he especially doesn't believe that Cain, haunted and unstable, forever dragged by his past, would suddenly become sincere about building a shining future with Phyllis. At first, Billy's suspicion is only a small alarm bell in his head, something he tries to ignore. Then he accidentally overhears a conversation between Cain and Phyllis, and that bell turns into a siren. Billy doesn't even need to hear much. He catches the wrong rhythm in Cain's voice, the kind of promises that sound passionate, but carry no warmth underneath, the kind of excitement that feels calculated instead of real. Billy isn't a professional investigator, but he has the instincts of a man who has destroyed himself before by trusting the wrong people. And that instinct screams one thing: Cain is acting. What separates Billy from most people is that he doesn't stop at suspicion. He investigates. Quietly. Carefully. He doesn't warn anyone. He doesn't create a scene. He starts gathering pieces, comparing patterns, and linking details like someone building a bomb with a timer. Billy follows Cain's movements, his words, his sudden devotion, and the deeper he digs, the uglier the picture becomes. Cain isn't partnering with Phyllis because he believes in her. Cain is using her as a shield, a stepping stone, and a shortcut to his own personal goals. Lily sits at the center of that motive like an open wound, and revenge curls around it like poison. Billy doesn't need to judge Cain's emotions, because Billy can already see the ending. If Phyllis keeps trusting Cain, she will become the sacrifice when everything blows up, and Cain will be the one who escapes the fire. Billy's hesitation isn't about whether he has proof. It's about whether Phyllis will listen. Phyllis doesn't like being saved. She hates being corrected, hates anyone implying she's made a mistake. And she hates it even more when it's belied man she sees as reckless, chaotic, and forever guilty of making his own life worse. Billy knows that if he simply walks up and tells her the truth, Phyllis might deny it, attack him, or worse, cling harder to Cain just to prove Billy wrong. So Billy chooses a cruel but necessary approach. He doesn't ask Phyllis to trust him. He forces her to face the truth with evidence that cannot be argued away. He brings her proof heavy enough to smash her pride, sharp enough to slice through the illusion Cain has been feeding her. The moment Billy lays the truth in front of Phyllis, her world goes silent. Not because she is weak, but because she is humiliated. For Phyllis, the deepest pain isn't that Cain doesn't truly love her. It's that Phyllis, the woman who prides herself on control, has been played. This is a direct hit to the identity she's been showing Genoa City for years. The identity of a woman no one can fool. In that instant, Phyllis doesn't just see Cain using her. She sees herself willingly walking into the trap because she wanted to believe in the empire, wanted to believe she could still terrify the world through one strategic partnership. And when she realizes she has been gaslighted, it feels like every light in her mind shatters at once, leaving behind a thick darkness made of shame. But Phyllis doesn't collapse into tears. She isn't built that way. For her, humiliation doesn't produce softness, it produces violence, emotional and strategic. Her rage detonates like an explosion that has been compressed for too long, so intense that logic becomes a luxury she no longer needs. Phyllis isn't only furious at Cain, she's furious at herself for believing him. And when someone like Phyllis is angry at herself, she finds a target to destroy so she doesn't have to sit with the pain. Cain has touched the one forbidden line in Phyllis's world. He has turned her into a joke, without her realizing it. He has made her think she held the reins when she was the horse being led. Phyllis swears she will burn down everything Cain has built, not only as revenge, but as a way to reclaim her power. She needs the world to see that even if she was fooled, she is still the one who ends the person who fooled her. From that second forward, the alliance turns into war. Phyllis no longer stands beside Cain as a partner, she looks at him as a target. The most terrifying part is that she doesn't attack him with random chaos. She attacks him like someone who understands exactly what he relies on, exactly what he has been building, exactly where his weak points are. Cain let Phyllis into the game too deeply. He gave her too much access. And now Phyllis knows far too much, as tells his cracks. The promises he made when he believed she was dreaming of a future with him. Quietly, relentlessly, Phyllis begins cutting off Cain's exits. She doesn't need to scream or threaten him in public. She only needs to shift the strategy slightly and Cain feels the ground under him start to shake. Cain thought he was holding the map. But Phyllis is the kind of woman who will burn the map just to make sure they both get lost in hell. Cain isn't naive. The moment he realizes Phyllis knows, he understands the danger has reached its most lethal stage. But what makes it worse is that Cain cannot retreat. He has gone too far. He has made too many moves. He has thrown himself into too much risk, and he has already built too much hostility with Victor. If Cain fails to control Phyllis now, he won't just lose an ally, will lose the only shield between himself and Victor Newman's punishment. Cain falls into a cold panic. He cannot beg, cannot soften the truth, cannot rewind time. He is forced to face Phyllis, who now wants to end his life's foundation piece by piece, while still thinking about Lilith, the woman he placed at the heart of this entire twisted plan. Cain is being ripped in two. If he fights to save himself, he exposes the ugliness of his manipulation and destroys any chance with Lily. If he plays the role of redemption, Phyllis will tear him apart before he can do anything. Billy, after revealing the truth, can't fully stay outside the explosion he has triggered. He watches Phyllis transform instantly from a woman drunk on power to a wounded predator, ready to bite back. Billy knows Phyllis well enough to understand she won't stop. But Billy also sees something even more dangerous the moment Phyllis turns her wrath toward Cain. She pushes herself into an even deadlier position in front of Victor. Because Victor does not care whether Phyllis is a victim of Cain's lies or a willing participant in his war. Victor only sees one thing: Phyllis is connected to the AI attack and the fall of Newman Enterprises. And while Phyllis is busy taking Cain apart to repair her pride, Victor will seize the moment to strike. That's what makes Phyllis's position suffocating. She loses Cain, loses the alliance, loses her shield, and stands alone as Victor's net tightens around her throat. That isolation doesn't only come from outside forces. It comes from inside Phyllis as well. Beneath the rage, she can feel the truth she hates most. Cain didn't just use her ambition. He used the softest part of her, the part that secretly wants to be loved in a way that feels powerful, chosen, undeniable. Phyllis despises that realization. She despises the fact that she has emotional cracks, that she craved validation that badly. So she turns it into war, because war is easier than self-reflection. Phyllis refuses to sit in grief. She allows herself only action. And the more she fights, the deeper she sinks into a conflict that leaves her no path back to safety. Cain, cornered and forced to react, begins to see Phyllis differently. He once believed she was just a tool, a temporary partner, a stepping stone back to Lily. But when Phyllis turns on him, Cain sees the full monster of what he has created, a woman who turns humiliation into fuel, who turns pain into a weapon. Cain realizes he underestimated her, and worse, he realizes he has stepped into a war he cannot win. Because victory for Phyllis is never just escape. Victory for Phyllis means the person who betrayed her loses everything. Cain knows that if Phyllis truly chooses destruction, she will collapse the sky itself just to bury him beneath it, simply to prove that no one has the right to make Phyllis Summers look foolish. The tension spreads like a metallic dust over every conversation, every decision, every moment of silence. Phyllis is no longer focused on ruling Newman Enterprises, she is executing a personal purge, a combination of revenge and survival. Because deep down, Phyllis understands that if she doesn't destroy Cain first, Cain will try to shift blame onto her and turn her into the sacrifice to save himself. And with Victor looming in the background, Phyllis's time is running out. Each hour that passes gives Victor more reason to tighten the grip. Michael Baldwin will keep digging. The legal pieces will keep stacking. The door to Phyllis's freedom will keep closing. Phyllis is fighting Cain, but she is also racing the verdict that is waiting for her. The darkest truth of all is that Victor wins no matter which of them falls first. If Cain collapses, Victor simply removes a piece and keeps hunting. If Phyllis collapses, Victor gets the ultimate trophy and turns it into a warning for the entire city. This war becomes a sealed room with no oxygen where the more they struggle, the faster they suffocate. The harder Phyllis attacks, the more she exposes cracks Victor can exploit. The harder Cain tries to survive, the clearer his deceit becomes. And the further he drifts from any possibility of redemption with Lily. And Billy, though his instincts drove him to do what he believed was right, cannot deny that he has thrown a match onto a powder keg that was already seconds away from exploding. In the end, as Phyllis stands amid the ruins of trust and the wreckage of her wounded pride, she begins to understand something even more poisonous than Cain's betrayal. She didn't just lose an ally. She lost the mask she has worn her entire life, the mask that says no one can fool her. And to survive, she needs a new performance. One where Phyllis is not the victim. Phyllis is the judge. Phyllis is the executioner. She will make Cain pay not only because he used her, but because he dared to believe she would swallow the humiliation in silence. But just as Phyllis prepares to deliver her first blow, a chill slides down her spine. Like someone is standing behind a door, listening, waiting. Because in this world, the most patient player is always Victor Newman. And right as Phyllis is ready to turn Cain into ashes, she realizes she may already be too late to escape the biggest trap of all. She has lost Cain, isolated herself, exposed her own weakness, and torn away her last shield. Out there, Victor is closing in with the most dangerous weapon he has, certainty that this time, Phyllis will have no one left to protect her. Phyllis tightens every survival instinct inside her, knowing that if she wants to live, she must strike first. But in that exact moment, one last truth flashes through her mind like lightning. Cain didn't just use her, left behind a trail that leads straight to Victor. And if Victor has it, the first person in handcuffs might not be Cain at all, it might be Phyllis herself. On our TV Spoilers channel, I always seek content inspiration for each video by compiling short video clips to analyze and offer my personal opinions. This channel specializes in analyzing, theorizing, and discussing plot points in the Young and the Restless series from the perspective of a longtime fan. Through this, viewers can gain deeper, more objective, and more interesting perspectives. Subscribe to the channel to stay updated on the latest news about the Young and the Restless series.